Hello and welcome to the Paintover feedback section of my channel. What is a paintover, you say? Paintovers are where you send me a painting that you want feedback on and I paint on top of it. This is an extremely useful form of feedback as it follows the show don't tell approach of painting and art education. If you want to paint over, please visit brendanmilostart.com and click on the contact page to email me. This is a free service I provide, including a layered PSD sent directly to you and only you, and also a video like this one where I break down the PSD file, that's a Photoshop file, and show you the time-lapse painting process. If you want to remain anonymous, or if you want a YouTube shoutout or a link to your channel, let me know in your email and I'll be happy to oblige. Again, this is a free service meant to give your art a second opinion from a professional artist in the games industry. This doesn't mean that my feedback is the law, and ultimately it's up to you which feedback applies and which you can ignore. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the video.
Hey everybody, this is Brendan, and today we are going to be looking at a mermaid portrait submitted by a former student of mine, Stephanie. She's an awesome artist, and her portfolio link will be listed below in the description. I think she's still working on a couple things on the site, but once that's done, it'll be in the description there, so you go over there and check out her artwork. So this is something submitted basically about portraits, and portraits are very difficult. I think there was a couple things she was wondering about generally with doing portraits, which is anatomy and lighting, so I tried to focus on that. And this is the side-by-side we can see here, so the original on the left, the Paintover on the right. And I think this is really fun because this underwater lighting leaves a lot of room for cool stuff with hair and just a lot of cool colors and like textures and things like that. Awesome. So let's go ahead and start off here. The original, some reference I got. Of course, reference is an essential component of doing good artwork and paintings and things like that. I didn't know what original reference she was using for the face, so I just went ahead and got my own reference and then riffed off of that a little bit as far as what I wanted to bring out in the face. So we got a little mer person from Harry Potter movie. We got a fish here just for a little bit of that texture reference, although I didn't really push the texture. Okay, so let's take a look and see layer by layer what I'm doing in here. Cool. Soft shadow. So first thing I did is with this lighting, I have this reference over here where it's really good for underwater lighting. Underwater lighting, we can see there's a few characteristics in here that really define it. We have this like bright highlight area, and then we have these like really saturated colors through here, and then we have very, very dark underneath on the neck, on the underside of the hair. So keeping that in mind, and then the skin gets a lot of bounce light. You can picture there's light not only coming in from the top, but there's light being bounced around and then off this shoulder here, bouncing back, hitting the face. And it's kind of the same here on this top one, where we have these bright lights, we have these saturated colors, and then it's very dark down here, and then we get light kind of bouncing in, and they may have some bounce. They may have some objects bouncing light back at her from off camera here. But then, you know, once we get in here, we can see that the skin gets very, very dark from shadows. So first step is bringing that out with soft shadow. You have my value layer up top here. It's just a layer filled with all black or all white, set to layer blend mode color. And I'm just going to toggle that so you can see this is already like in one step, and I just went through with an airbrush here, right? One step. Just basically saying, okay, as far as values, let's push our shadows first. I always recommend like carve out shadows first and then build up the lights, the highlights second. So pushing shadows, really getting these areas to just knock back the area under the chin where there's a cast shadow, just darkening that a little bit. And then getting some cast shadow from the hair, this hard line here representing that. Cool, so making some statements, and you can just see how that when we push a lot of stuff back, we really also focus on the face. Okay, second, color. Yeah, so this is color dodge layer blend mode, and it's basically just that. It's saturating up this hair, and I really wanted to play with the red in it. I mean, initially it was a little bit more brownish or like a little bit less saturated, but I feel like there's a really great opportunity here, given our reference, to really play that up and make the lighting seem cool and magical and underwater. So that's that. A little bit of light. This is a screen layer blend mode, and I'm just going through and just kind of like I'm lightening up the background in these two layers as well, the water. I really like the lighting in this reference, like the colors and the light. So going through, lightening up where the water surface is under those ripples, and then getting that nice kind of like bloomy effect of like the really bright highlights on the hair, and trying to play that up. And this is what I call a redraw layer, where it's basically a normal layer blend mode. And I go through and I just reblock in, and all I'm doing is I'm sampling colors that are already, and values, right, that are already in the painting. And I'm just going through and drawing based on that. Hair is really, really interesting as far as how to render it. I suppose I could do a video specifically on it. But in general, block in. You notice that with what I'm doing with the hair is that I'm only choosing a few areas to kind of like block in chunks of strands, or like a little zigzag, a little ribbon of highlight across the hair. So basically, when we're looking at hair, you can see I'm just like blocking in chunks of that, even this little chunk here. But in back here, it's just like this big chunk, you know. We have these big soft chunks, and what I'm doing is going on top of those and painting in little hard edge details. This is just an airbrush here, like a basic round airbrush, and I'm softening and hardening the edge on it. But I recommend approaching hair this way, where you start with soft and draw on top. And you'll see in the time-lapse painting video at the end of this how I approach that, where it's just like very soft, and then save some of the sharp details. Redrawing face, I think that happened, yeah. Oh, another thing I did in this layer, I started removing the scales here. I thought that the scales on the original were they're not quite fitting, and even on like the fish face here, we see there's a little bit of scales down here, but really, and even in the choice here, the choice they're doing for this Harry Potter movie, for this Mermaid, they're choosing to not have the big round scales. I just felt that they were out of place. I wanted to focus this paint over on lighting and anatomy, and I think that the texture was something on top of that to explore as like a next step where this paintover leaves off. But yeah, first settling the structure of the face underneath, the structure of everything is really, really important. Yeah, and you can always add that in later. So, okay, so redraw hair, and you can see I'm starting to smooth that out. Redraw face, and this is, you can see this is just like one side of the face that I'm redrawing. You'll see in the video that I just like copy this and flip it over. I'm making design decisions about this face here. So what that means is that I really I like some of the stuff going on, the angles here. You can see the blocks of light. I'm just going to make this black and white so we can see. We can see these shapes here, these like triangular, very angular shapes, right? And even the jaw coming down here. I really like these angles that they use in the face. So what I'm trying to do here, I'm going to go ahead and just turn that on. Cool. I just activated a couple more layers just when I finished out the face redraw. I'm just basically doing that. I'm looking at how can we look at some angles here with the face, you know, and just really play up that like really like triangular, pointy, faceted, angular nature, and make her feel a little bit like almost like sinister, you know. I think that there's something to be said about making the face more angular. I use this face down here, a little bit of reference as far as just general, I guess some of the nose structure and some of the stuff in the cheekbones and things like that, but I wouldn't say this is a portrait of this lady here. Cool. So let's take a look at what I'm doing in the face here. I'm not going to go over facial anatomy a lot in this video. What I will say though is that it is about finding the skull underneath. So the more that you can find that skull, the better off you're going to be. Speaking of anatomy, one thing I feel like I did flub, is the where the sternocleidomastoid, where the neck, those little like muscles and tendons come in here, and then where the clavicle, that little collarbone, comes in here. I feel like I pulled it down and I didn't quite render this area well, and I just kind of like positioned it to be right behind where the necklace was conveniently. I actually think this is an example of where the original is doing a better job of kind of like depicting where it would be, which is like the dip is like right above here. So I probably should have spent more time there, got a little bit of reference, but so I wouldn't ignore that I would ignore that as far as anatomy. That being said, this isn't about the spot down there, so this is a portrait, and that's not to excuse the mistake, but I would say that, you know, we want to make sure to focus our eye up here. Now, one thing I'm doing too, I think it's interesting to point out, is the relative value of things in here, and how I'm trying to control lighting. If we look at the values, where our highest contrast is and where the brightest brights are, which basically says where's the light hitting the hardest, we can actually see these eyes are like really strong value. We have this like piece of shoulder right here that's very high value, and then we have a spot that's very dark back here, but even under here, very bright value. But overall, the range of value in this, I would say, is very like light. It's very high key. And I like thinking of things in terms of this chart. If we think of like black, white, then a lot of this stuff here, other than this little piece here, kind of exists in like the upper part here, which isn't necessarily bad. I think that it makes it feel a little bit flatter if you're going to use less value range. And then if you have this piece, this dark piece here right next to it, I think it makes it feel kind of out of place, just having a very dark value, and then the value range is very compressed right next to it. You can picture like this background part, right? It's like right down here. And then there's this like this gap here, where it just kind of feels like these kind of don't, you know, this gap means these don't blend together as much. Not saying that this should be filled out next to each other, but I think we need a little bit more value range here. Hope I'm explaining that well. So what I'm doing here, sorry about that. What I'm doing here is I'm focusing on these really, really bright lights up here. We're getting a lot of strong light coming down from the top, from through the water, just like here. The lighting in this, it's a really fun photo, and there's a little bit of reflection you can see too in here, which if we had more compositional space on top, I could probably try to capture that reflection of her in the waves. So we got these really strong lights coming down, and what that's doing is it's just like blowing out or overexposing the top of the head here where it is. And the hair is very light, and it's just kind of like it's floating like a big kind of like nebulous mass in the water, and then there's a couple sharp strands coming out. But then underneath we have this like really dark area here, and I know I just scribbled all over everything here, but what I'm trying to say here is it's kind of the same effect where we have this kind of like rooftop or like canopy, this big soft nebulous canopy that's being lit on the top, right? And then underneath, it's just this nice kind of like fuzzy dark, and we can really, really soften and like make the shadows ambiguous, and then like render and sharpen in the light areas. And what our eye does is it kind of fills in the gaps in the shadows. So what I tried to do is reinforce that, is have this like nice tightly lit area of the face, and even, you know, not the eye sockets there. Again, the skull underneath, finding those eye sockets. Really important, sitting those eyes within. A lot of people paint the whites of the eyes too bright, and that's just because it's kind of like, it's easy. It's I guess our mental representation, our mental image of eyes as, oh, eye whites are white, so I'll make them a light value. But really, if we were to, let's go ahead and actually sample. Let's sample the value here of the white of the eye. We're at a 45% black. And then we'll sample this cheek. This is a 56% black. And we can see that this cheek is lighter than this eye white by about 10%. So, well, it looks lighter than the shadows around it, and it should be. It's actually darker than the skin in the light, and that's really important. Okay, so and another thing too is that this whole area down here, and we can see in the original, our values here and our values here match. So our eye is being like pulled away because things are sharp. We have details, we have textures, we have hair strands. Things are equal brightness, and there's detail down here. So what it's doing is, as a portrait, we want our eyes, the viewer's eyes, to be focused right in on this face here. And the more stuff we put out here is going to just start pulling the viewer's eyes away. So it's really, really important to try and keep them looking at the face. So you can see the values here are lighter than the values down here, and maybe they wouldn't be in real life. Maybe that there'd be some sharp light starting to hit here. Maybe this would have a big reflection on it as well, this little piece of jewelry. But what I tried to do rendering this stuff is try to keep the values very minimal and tried to not render too much. You can see like even the sharpness of this stuff is I tried to really control, like I'm going to render this bit of the necklace here, but this is still just flat. I tried to flatten fuzzy this stuff so that we're not looking at the whole thing evenly. Cool. So values are starting to work out. That's fun. More hair highlights. This is a technique I like to use for hair. I'm going to go ahead and share it here. This is something semi-recently that I've started doing. So hair highlights here, and some other strands and things like that. This is me adding in. This is actually a normal layer blend mode. Sometimes I'll do a screen, and we can see I'm adding a little bit more color to this. I really wanted to bring out the color there. But basically, when you have fuzzy, soft stuff, it's really nice. I tend to find these like chunks, right? And we can think of hair, you're building up the hair in layers. I'm just going to draw off to the side here, where, oops, there we go. And you can even see in here, you're trying to get like a chunk of hair. So there's like a big piece of hair here. And then the next layer on top, you're going to kind of like define a little bit of like the shape of it. Right, so this is like shadow, and this is like a medium tone or something like that. And then what I'll generally do is I'll start to define the highlight on top, and I'm just going to paint in red. You picture this solid red as a highlight. The highlight on top is like a band flowing across, right? If the hair goes this way, if the hair flows down this way, the highlight is a band that goes across. So to kind of bring this, let me just sample directly from this photo. Let's say that we have a piece of hair down here, and I'm just going to keep it soft, right? We have this strand of hair. I can paint with an airbrush, keep it really soft. And then what I'll do here, I'm going to add a little color variety like that in here. Just paint on top a little bit and kind of get that little bit of color variety, a little bit of light pulling out. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint right on top of it in a new layer. I'm going to paint with 100% opacity. I'm going to sample this here. Let's see if that's good. Yeah. Paint across here. I'm using this smudge tool down here. So the brush tool, let's go ahead and just pull this into the center a little bit more. Smudge tools here, maybe the blur sharpen smudge tool. I really like the smudge tool a lot for hair and eyebrows and fur. I think that it's really nice to use for that. So I'm going to go up here to the thing. I'm going to click sample all layers, turn that off. 70% opacity, that sounds great. And sample all layers, really, it would merge all this stuff together from the different layers in here. So I just want to look at this specific brush stroke that I did across. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it down to 50. I'm going to zigzag through that. And then I'm going to erase, airbrush at like 30% opacity. Highlights taper, so I'm going to just go through and kind of taper that. We can already see what that's doing here, is we're getting kind of that effect. And then if I go back to my base layer here, go to my smudge, maybe make it stronger, back to 70%, and then just kind of like pull in on the silhouette. Silhouette is huge in hair and getting that feeling of the feeling of hair. It's really sharp areas, and then some like mainly soft with a little bit of sharp. And just kind of adjusting that intensity to try and find the right amount there. And I just kind of build up hair this way, and then I may go back on top in like a screen layer, right? I may go back and do a little bit of like playing around with like some errant strands or whatever. But really trying to and then tapering those off. But really what that's doing is it's defining the hair. It's allowing a lot of this to read as hair holistically, but you're really picking and choosing where your sharp areas are. We can see really quickly in like 3 layers here, we have some hair. It isn't necessarily indicative of the way I would treat this hair under this lighting scenario. It's kind of just a generic tuft, but it's kind of, for me, I tend to think of it in 3 layers, which is like blocking in the masses, ribbon highlight across, and then just kind of zigzag with that smudge and taper, erase away. And then paint in strands on top. You can use your hairbrush here. There's a lot of brushes that have like a combing effect. I use Blur's Good Brush. If you look over at my painting tips and tricks video, it covers where to get Blur's Good Brush and kind of choosing the right brushes. But yeah, so this is cool. This is a hairbrush. We can see, whoops, hair. Yeah, and we can see already something like this, right? Maybe I like that effect better. Just erase with an airbrush. Whenever you brush something, it's good to just kind of taper it away a little bit. There we go. Yeah, and we can see already, like, it's just like how quick that is, just knock in a couple strokes here. But it really is that texture going on top of good structure, good foundation is really important. So, anyway, hair. Cool. So I'm just kind of doing that here loosely, but I'm not trying to, like, this is a Paintover video. I'm not going to, like, spend a lot of time. This whole Paintover took, like, an hour or less, so I'm not trying to do a detailed render. I just want to kind of, like, start to push in the direction of things and kind of cover some principles here. Alright, so let's finish this up. So I did some highlights here in a color dodge, and really what I'm doing is I'm trying to get more color in here, a little bit of texture on the skin. Just kind of pulling out these areas here. Reinforcing a little bit of shadow here, and again, this is just like me looking and wanting to reinforce the values a little bit and keep us up here. And this is what I call correct darks. The monitor I work on is, I think the things are darker, the image will be darker than it looks on my monitor. So I like to just go through and pull my output levels, my black, up a bit to compensate for that. Okay, so that's it. That's the Paintover. Before, after. before, after. If you guys want to paint over, feel free to reply in the comments or go to brendanmilosart.com. Contact me, email me, request a paint over. I will get to it. I will respond. It may be a little bit, but I will give you the layered PSD file. And if you want to be anonymous, if you want me to give you a shout out, a YouTube video link or portfolio link, let me know. Other than that, feel free to let me know in the comments below if you have any general comments or questions. And now I'm just going to play the Paintover time-lapse video. So thank you guys so much.